She's a man. Such a simple. Fire on? Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you so much for the wonderful, melodious, and heartful, touching kirtan. It took us to Sri Vrindavan Dham.
Say what?
You took us to Vrindavan Dham, Maharaj.
Great, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Maharaj. I request Bhagavan Govinda Prabhu to offer garland to Maharaj on behalf of Yatra.
Who's going to give me a garland?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances, Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Can you?
His Bhakti Vrindavan Govinda Swami Maharaj ki jai. Shila
Yeah.
Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Gaura Premanande. Hari Hari.
Hari Hari Bo.
Thank you, Bhagavan Govinda Prabhu. Now I request Jugal Kishore Prabhu to speak a few words about Maharaj.
Oh, man.
Since Guru Maharaj, and it's my pleasure and honor to be asked by Sri Ranga Krishnadas Prabhu to introduce me this evening, introduce you to the audience this evening. His Holiness BB Govinda Maharaj.
Swami Maharaj.
Joined the Krishna conscious movement in Buffalo, New York in 1971 and received initiation from Srila Prabhupada the same year. The lesser known facts of Maharaj: he served as a cook and pujari in the ISKCON centers in Buffalo and Toronto. he gave birth for Vrindavan in 1977. Then onwards, he served the Srila Prabhupada's movement in the centers of ISKCON in Greece, Italy, Israel, and France. Later on, he came to Vrindavan, where he was responsible for establishing the Food for Life program. And then by the divine instructions of Srila Prabhupada and his other devotees, he was in Central Asia, where he preached in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and also later on, he was asked to be the governing body commissioner for the CIS countries and parts of the Volga region. Currently, he is also the GBC for the Middle East Yatra. And I would say a defining moment in his Krishna consciousness was a conversation that he witnessed between Srila Prabhupada and his dear god brother, Srila Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj in October 1977, where Srila Prabhupada repeatedly quoted Srila Narottam Das Thakura's verse, Tadera Charana Seve Bhakta Sanibas, Janame Janame Hoye, E Abhilas, that this is my desire, that birth after birth I may live with those devotees who serve the lotus feet of the 6 Goswamis. His Holiness Bhakti Govinda Swami Maharaj felt that Srila Prabhupada was revealing his integral reason for spreading the Krishna consciousness movement, his deep spirit for love and service for Krishna's devotees. So that is something which he took to his heart, and now Maharaj travels to join devotees in the congregational chanting of the holy names, and he is known for his lively chanting of the holy names. And today we saw how he was joined by 2 of his assistants, His Grace Akinchana Krishnadas Prabhu and also Partha Sarathi Prabhu. So we thank them also for being assisting in this Kirtan efforts by Maharaj all across the world. So thank you very much, Maharaj, for coming over to the Gauranga Desh Yatra. And thank the Yatra also for inviting Maharaj over. And without much ado, please request you to take over and give us your words of wisdom, Maharaj. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Jugal Krishna Prabhu. And thank you so much to Akinchana Krishna Prabhu and Parthasarathi Prabhu to support Maharaj for the Kirtan. Thank you. Over to you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, everyone. I hope that everybody is well in Gauranga Desh and whatever Desh may be seeing this tonight. Just one moment, everyone. Do I need to speak as if I have a Russian translator on this?
I thought that there will be also Hindi translation.
No, there's no Hindi translation, correct?
No, Maharaj.
Okay.
They will manage.
Okay, because somehow or other, my Russian disciples are tuned into this program also, and somebody is translating. And I spoke to someplace last week and they had Hindi translation, so it was convenient so I could pause. And it's also convenient for me because, number one, I'm a slow thinker and I'm a slow speaker. And I always mix things up. An example of mixing things up is that I got, although the coordinator from Gauranga Desh sent me about 200 messages reminding me that the class was tonight, yesterday afternoon, I was out riding my bike in the villages of Vrindavan, and it was 6 o'clock, and I started having a panic attack because I thought that the class was yesterday night. So this is how I get things mixed up. And a further example of how I get things mixed up is that I prepared an entire class for another topic tonight, but we'll just save that for another time. I always say this aloud when you turn 70, that you can get bewildered about things. So once again, thank you all for having me. I'm in Vrindavan. I'm not at my home in Vrindavan because renovation work is going on in my home in Vrindavan. I'm staying at the home of one very, very nice devotee who has a big apartment and a building which is across from my home. It's a very nice place. And we've been here for about 2 months now. And I imagine that we're going to be here for at least another 2 to 3 weeks until everything gets wrapped up at my house. Low battery on Shiv Charan's telephone. And I can't see, there we are, yeah. Yeah, I have to get some power on this phone here. Vrindavan has been very wonderful. This is the longest I've been in Vrindavan since 1995. Longest time consistently I've been here since 1995. By the grace of COVID-19, they say that there's a silver lining in every cloud, and for me that silver lining was to be, caught in lockdown in my home. We had a different plan to go someplace else, but when I woke up to go to the airport that morning, I received so many messages that the country where I was going, the Prime Minister closed the country the night before, therefore travel was not allowed. And one of my friends was filled with anxiety, and I just smiled. And I said, Jai Jai Shri Radhe Shyam. You have allowed me to stay in Braja, which is my real home of homes and the place I like to be the most. And since we've been here during the lockdown, we've seen everything wonderful. The first 2 or 3 months of the lockdown here in Vrindavan, it was like the Vrindavan that I lived in when I was a young boy. It was absolutely silent. The only thing that you could hear were birds. There were no cars. There were no people honking. There was none of that business. It was just absolute wonderful silence. It was, Vrindavan is always the most glorious place to chant the holy names and engage in bhajan. But during that time, it was extra wonderful. It was super wonderful. And we've seen all the changes of the seasons over here. We saw spring. We saw the coming of summer. We saw the summer season, and the summer wasn't so bad over here. We only had 46 degrees for maybe 1 week, and the rest of the time it was sort of in the mid-30s. It was quite a pleasant summer. We saw the rainy season, which in my opinion could have been more rainy, but as they say, beggars can't be choosers. So we were very satisfied. We saw the second summer, and I can remember when I lived here in the past, the second summer was sort of like the season that I dreaded the most because it's wet from the rainy season, plus it's really, really warm. But it wasn't so intolerable this year. And very quickly, the second season snapped into autumn season and then into winter. And I must admit, we've had quite a chilly winter. Is that correct? I mean,
Yes.
it has been, we've had some very cold days going down to like 2-3 degrees, you know, where you didn't want to go outside, you didn't want to do anything. But now for about the past 10 days, the weather has started changing and spring is upon us. So we're so thankful to Radha and Krishna, and I'm so thankful to my spiritual master that I could be in my home during this time. I have to admit that I miss, you know, being in big groups of devotees chanting Hare Krishna and talking about Krishna because there's so much nectar in that. All of our literatures explain that the process of Krishna consciousness should be conducted in the association of Vaishnavas. We should hear and chant and dance in the association of Vaishnavas. Just like Srinivasacharya, he explained the character of the 6 Goswamis, and he begins by saying, Krishnot kirtanagana nartana paro premam rito nidhi, premam rito nidhi. He said that the 6 Goswamis were always engaged in chanting and dancing in one another's association. And because of that, they were always swimming in the ocean of the nectar of love of God. And despite the fact that they had such simple and austere lives, and they gave up eating and they gave up sleeping, they were never affected by that, because by the process of chanting and dancing in one another's association, they always became enchanted with the nectar of Radha and Krishna. So it's wonderful to be with the Vaishnavas and to engage in that activity. Personally, I haven't had many kirtans with groups of people during the lockdown because I've been a little careful about my health. Maybe just 10 or 12 times, something like that. I've had people over and we've had kirtans together. Akinchana, he does go to the temple. One of Akinchana's favorite sevas is to sing the Rajbhog Arti for the deities every day. So he goes there. It's a stand-up kirtan, and it's standing, it's chanting, and dancing. He loves that so much. And Partha, he goes to the temple in the evening with a select group of his friends at a certain time, and they do kirtan for the deities over there. But I haven't been going out so much. I wanted to be careful. COVID has been here in Vrindavan, but it hasn't been so severe, I don't think, in Vrindavan. I know a number of devotees who've had COVID, and a few of them had, you know, kind of rough cases, but they managed it at home. And a number of devotees, they had light cases and they were able to shake it within a couple of weeks. And here in Vrindavan now, everybody says COVID is finished. If you go to Delhi, everybody's got a mask on. But here in Vrindavan, no one is wearing a mask except me and some of my associates when we go out. One way to get away from Vrindavan is that I bought a bicycle and I go out cycling, and I go out and I visit the places of Krishna's Leela. And it's been very beautiful because I've seen the Bajra crop this year. I've seen the mustard crop this year. I've seen the wheat crop, which is coming now. And it's all extraordinarily beautiful. So I've been very blessed. And I think myself and some of my friends who are here in Vrindavan, we're very thankful that Krishna has given us this time. We were all on the road for so many years, and now Krishna has given us the time just to be at home. It's like my mom always used to tell me, you know, you'll never sleep better than when you sleep in your own bed. And I've had the opportunity to sleep in my own bed for practically a year now. So, of course, it's a little different than the Goswamis. They slept under a different tree every night, but I'm sleeping in the same bed every night, and it's been a blessing. So, but I miss the devotees. I miss the natural kindness of the devotees. I miss the hospitality and the love that the devotees show. And in every place, it's a different type of hospitality and it's a different type of love. When I come to the Gulf countries, the devotees are so warm, and it's a particular type of mood of loving exchange there. And when I go to Russia and I spend time with the Russian devotees, it's another flavor of love. It's very, very big charitable hearts and so much warm hospitality and care. I thought that the loving exchanges with devotees couldn't get better than with the Russian devotees. But then a number of years ago, something interesting happened, and I started preaching in China. And in China, it's just, regardless of whatever you may read in the news about China or what you may hear about the Chinese, they are the most hospitable, loving, friendly, cordial people. They just relish loving exchanges with other individuals. So I miss that, and I don't know when COVID will end. And I don't know what it will be like when COVID is over. I speak to my friend Shivaram Swami a few times a week. Last time we were speaking, you know, I told him I don't even know, you know, he was saying, will you travel again? And I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know if devotees will want guests or how soon they will want guests. I said, people have become very adept and accustomed to this, you know, online exchange of thoughts and ideas. And Shivaram Swami told me, no, Maharaj, people are very sick and tired of virtual association. He said, people want the real thing. People want to sit with Vaishnavas. People want to touch Vaishnavas. People want to hear Vaishnavas. People want to sing with Vaishnavas. And I guess that's because we should always understand that the Vaishnavas are the only people who can fulfill the deepest, heartmost desire of every living being. Now we look at ourselves, we look inside of our hearts, and we know that there are many different things going on. And we see the progression of our hearts through the years and the decades of our life. We may start when we're young with one powerful set of desires, and as we age, hopefully with Krishna consciousness, that changes. But for every living being in the world, the deepest, most integral, most secret desire of his heart is just to love and serve Krishna. More than anything else. And when we have the wish-fulfilling tree association of Vaishnavas, and we hear from Vaishnavas, that desire can become fulfilled. And Vaishnavas are the most compassionate of all people. I mean, we just think of, say we think of our example of our Srila Prabhupada. And many times I've told a story how Srila Prabhupada came to Toronto in 1976 when I was serving there. I was the cook in Toronto, and I had a reputation all over North America as being one of the two best cooks. You know, there was a Yojapati in Toronto, and there was Gopati in Chicago, and there was Gayatri in this faraway, you know, place called Gainesville, Florida. Srila Prabhupada went to Gainesville one time, and you know, he was addressing the devotees, and he said, "I've come to this remote corner of the earth to give you Krishna consciousness." And the reason that Gayatri was, you know, it was competition with her is because she used to make these, you know, ultra delicious chocolate cakes and chocolate cream-filled eclairs. And when the Sankirtan parties would come, you know, she would just stuff them with that and they would die, you know. But I had quite a reputation. And Srila Prabhupada came in 76. He came in 75. We had a very small temple. And then he said we should get a bigger temple. So we got the church in Toronto. And he came in 76. He said, "This is great victory over Maya, that you've gotten this church. So many people will be able to come to this place to have the association of Vaishnavas and learn the science of Krishna consciousness." But when he came, Srila Prabhupada, we heard, was not feeling so well. He had some toothache, and Prabhupada was such a person that when he didn't feel well, if there was anything, you know, that he wasn't feeling well about, he would just stop eating. You know, Prabhupada is a very difficult patient. And anyhow, he came, he arrived, and after his arrival, he went upstairs to his quarters. And I had, that day before he arrived, I had cooked a huge thali of so many different types of wonderful sweets that I wanted to take up to Srila Prabhupada. And my temple president came to me. My temple president, we were all the same age. We were all about, let's see, 76 means I was 25 years old. We were all boys. And he said, "Come, let's go to Srila Prabhupada's room. And we'll ask Prabhupada, you know, what he wants to do while he is here." And so I grabbed my plate of sweets and I'd offered them to the deities. So it was a plate of Mahaprasadam. And we took them up to Srila Prabhupada's room and we went in. And whenever we walked into Prabhupada's room, it was just dandavats. And then we'd get up. You couldn't go into your spiritual master's room unless it was dandavats. And we got up, and then I placed the sweets on one side of Srila Prabhupada's low table. And just next to the end of his table, there was a door that led into the area where he slept. And then there was another door, and the toilet area was in there. And Srila Prabhupada looked at me and he said, "What is this?" And I said, "Srila Prabhupada, this is Mahaprasadam." And he said, "Cover immediately. Toilet is on the other side." So I covered. And then my temple president, his name was Vishwakarma Prabhu. And Vishwakarma looked at Srila Prabhupada and he said, "Srila Prabhupada, we understand that you're a little bit indisposed. So we want to know why, while you're here, what do you want your schedule to be? Do you just want to give class, or do you not want to give class? Do you want to work on just your books? Do you want to have meetings with reporters and different people who come to see you? We don't want to inconvenience you, Srila Prabhupada." And as Srila Prabhupada heard inconvenience, he just started laughing. He smiled and he started laughing. And he said, he looked over and he said, "Inconvenience me? I left my beloved Radha Damodar in Vrindavan to come here to be with you people." He said, "What more of an inconvenience could there be?" And then he said, "But now I'm here and I am your servant. So I will do whatever you tell me to do." And then we were just sort of flabbergasted. So such compassion. I was thinking recently, I just turned 70. And I'm experiencing 70. And I was thinking, my goodness, Srila Prabhupada didn't begin his international preaching till he was 70. You know, I mean, we've been traveling for some years, but Srila Prabhupada began traveling at the age of 70. Such compassion. They're very compassionate because they're contributing the greatest benefit to the human society, which is love for Krishna and the opportunity to have relationship with the devotees of Krishna. I'm thankful that Jugal mentioned that story when he was introducing me. You know, many times, but people want to give introductions. I guess that's the appropriate thing to do. But many of you, we've known one another for 20 years or so. And I feel that introductions are not required. And people will say, but there are some new ones who maybe need to have an introduction. And Jugal, he got the introduction right this time because he basically read it from something, you know. But he told a nice story. He told a story that had a lot of impact on me about Vaishnava relationships and following the mood of the Vaishnavas. And, you know, when we speak about Vaishnavas, and when we speak, like many times we speak about devotees. And like we hear Prabhupada speak about devotees. And sometimes we equate that what Prabhupada is saying about the devotees, he's speaking about us. But oftentimes Prabhupada is speaking about the perfect devotees who are an example for us to follow. And that story that Jugal told, I can share it with you because it gives such a nice perspective of how Vaishnavas are and how Vaishnavas have loving exchanges with one another. And these loving exchanges between Vaishnavas, this is the real nectar of Krishna consciousness. When we can associate with one another according to the principles of Vaishnava Sadachar, when we can associate with one another, not looking at one another in any type of judgmental way, when we can associate with one another not in any type of hierarchical way, when we can just accept one another for who we are on our path of devotional service, and when we can have the good intelligence and the good heart to appreciate everybody, you know, for who they are, where they are on their path of devotional service, without that judgmental mentality, relationships start to become nectarian. So I had this experience in 1977. I served in Toronto in our ISKCON Center until about the middle of June, maybe a little closer to the beginning of, maybe a little closer to the beginning of July in 1977. And then I came to Vrindavan. I'd seen Prabhupada perhaps once a year. Each year I was a devotee, but I was a foot soldier. I wasn't a general. I wasn't a captain. I wasn't a major. I wasn't a lieutenant. I was just one of the foot soldiers. I was the cook. I would go and I would do the shopping for the temple. Sometimes they'd let me do, you know, worship the deities. I'm a very simple person. I loved to clean. But I never had Prabhupada's association. All those years, I never went on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada. You know, I never had that opportunity. Why? Because I was always back in the temple cooking the meals for all the devotees who had come to see Srila Prabhupada. And I didn't lament, you know, not being able to, I didn't lament not being able to go for the walks with Srila Prabhupada, because I felt like I was serving my spiritual master and I was serving his beloved disciples. So I was happy, you know. And I always tried to cook the best I very could and cook. I used to try to cook, you know, the things that I heard Srila Prabhupada liked and the way he liked them spiced. That's the way we were back then, you know. It's like now, many devotees in different parts of the world at ISKCON, they don't like the, you know, the ISKCON Indian cuisine so much. They don't like the chili, you know, they don't like different spices. But we were all really into that back then. And I was especially a good sweet cook. So we always had fantastic sweets in our temple. But I never had Prabhupada's association. So I took a very bold step and I said, I'm going to go to Vrindavan and I'm going to do service there so I can see my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. Because we heard that he was preparing to leave this world and I wanted to spend a little time with him before he left. So I came here, I was in Vrindavan for one day, and the next day I became the official cook in Vrindavan. And at that time we cooked on wood because there was no gas bottles back in 1976. We cooked on wood and we would get covered in black soot. And I was lifting these big, huge pots that had black soot all over. I'd just become so black every time I would cook. And I would start my cooking about 5 o'clock in the morning, cook the breakfast. After cooking the breakfast, I would cook the lunch. I would finish the lunch in time so that it could be offered to Krishna Balaram. And I used to keep our horrible kitchen so clean that, you know, we could actually send things over to the deities from our devotee kitchen. And then I would serve the devotees their prasadam at 1:30 or 2, and I would clean the kitchen. And then I'd go scrub myself in cold water because we didn't have warm water back then. And then I would put on clean clothes, and then I would run to Srila Prabhupada's room. And generally at that time, they always kept the doors open at Srila Prabhupada's house. You know, it's sort of like in the beginning of ISKCON, when Prabhupada was at 26 2nd Avenue, you know, his doors were always open. Any person could just go in and sit down while Prabhupada was doing something, and then devotees could just ask him questions at any time. I can remember Mukunda Goswami in one of his remembrances. He said one of the most amazing things that he remembered about Prabhupada is that Prabhupada was a very attentive listener, meaning anybody that came in to talk, she would probably just sit there and listen and listen and listen, and then try to give that person some pertinent guidance how he could develop his Krishna consciousness. So in the beginning, doors open. And then when ISKCON started booming and Srila Prabhupada was, you know, writing all night long, managing all day long, giving class morning, giving class evening. And Prabhupada was basically very tight schedule, very blocked. But in the end, the doors just opened again. And you just go into Prabhupada's room and he'd be laying on his bed. And some soft kirtan would be going on, or they would be reading Srimad Bhagavatam to Prabhupada, or reading letters to Srila Prabhupada, and you could just sit there and chant japa and be with Srila Prabhupada. So one afternoon, I went over to Prabhupada's room, but the door was locked. There was a big padlock on the outside, and I was thinking, maybe Srila Prabhupada is having a bad day, you know, and they'd want to restrict the devotees coming in. And then I looked up and I saw Prabhupada's godbrother, Srila Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. And Prabhupada and Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji, they loved one another. One time I was speaking to Babaji Maharaj. I said, when did you first meet Prabhupada? He said, I met him in the 40s in Allahabad. When I saw him, it was love at first sight. That's the way he described it. He said, we always loved one another. You know, they say birds of a feather flock together. Here you had two pure devotees whose hearts were, you know, what does it say in the beginning of the Bhagavatam? Nirmat saranam satam, you know, free from envy. Not a trace of envy. No aroma. They just loved one another. And Babaji Maharaj, when I went to the house that afternoon, he was pacing back and forth in front of Prabhupada's room. He was very small, like Srila Prabhupada, and he was the same age as Srila Prabhupada. And he always wore a little white cloth that just came above his knees. And generally, he always wore one of those Indian t-shirts. And he was always, I think he shaved maybe once a month, so he was always like gray stubble. And he was constantly chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. He never stopped. Srila Prabhupada told us, Babaji Maharaj chants the Mahamantra 24 hours a day. And sometimes I would be in the room, he'd be with Prabhupada, and it was just constantly, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. He just never stopped chanting. And so he was outside, and I knew who he was. So I went over to him, and I bowed down, and I offered dandavats. And then I reached over and I took dust from his feet, and I put on my eyes, on my head, and on my heart. And I said, Babaji Maharaj, I said, do you have some service for me? What can I do for you? And he looked at me, he said, yes, I want to see Prabhupada immediately. He was very emphatic. Immediately, I want to see Prabhupada. So you all know that Prabhupada has a garden behind his house, and there used to be an entrance to the garden through the guest house lobby. Maybe it's still there, I don't know. So I went in through that side, and I came in to the back of Prabhupada's house, and I came up to Prabhupada's door, and I offered obeisances, and I got up, and then I went over to Prabhupada's bed. And His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj was sitting on the bed with Srila Prabhupada. And I leaned over and I said, Goswami Maharaj, Kinshana Krishna Das Babaji Maharaj wants to see Prabhupada immediately. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj turned to Prabhupada and he said, Prabhupada, Babaji Maharaj wants to see you immediately. And then Prabhupada looked up and he said, bring him immediately. So I ran out and I felt, I did something for a pure devotee. And I was so happy. And I went on and I said, Babaji Maharaj, come immediately, and see Srila Prabhupada. So I took him in through the back way. And when he came into the room, I saw something so nice. Tamal Krishna Maharaj got down from the bed. He was just sitting on the bed next to Prabhupada, talking to him. They had such an intimate relationship. And he got off the bed and he offered his obeisances to Babaji Maharaj. And Babaji Maharaj sort of like bounced up on the bed. And Prabhupada and him, they gave pranam to one another. And this is the point that Jugal Prabhu was speaking about. I was just on the other side of the head of the bed from where Srila Prabhupada's head was. And in my mind, I was thinking, aha, now I am going to see two perfect devotees have relationship with one another. I will see what the perfect devotees do. So what they did is Babaji Maharaj looked at Prabhupada and he cracked a joke. But when he cracked the joke, Prabhupada was laying on his bed and he started sort of laughing some. And then he looked up at Babaji Maharaj and Prabhupada cracked a joke. And Babaji Maharaj was a very animated person. He was like, ha, 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 ha. And then Babaji Maharaj cracked another joke. And then Prabhupada was laughing, and then Prabhupada cracked another joke. Then Babaji Maharaj said, he cracked another joke, and Prabhupada, at that point, he went, Tadira Charana Seva Bhakti Sanivas. Janame Janami Hoy Eyabilas. And I think all of you know that line from the song by Narottam Das Thakur, where he says that, my only heartfelt desire is to live in the association of Vaishnavas birth after birth, and serve their lotus feet. Just live in Vaishnava association and serve their lotus feet. You'll live in Vaishnava association. Always have like a positive mentality about the Vaishnavas. Live in Vaishnava association. Always have an open heart to the Vaishnavas. Live in the Vaishnava association. Always have kind words and sweet, loving words to say to Vaishnavas. Never being judgmental about the Vaishnavas. Never looking at the Vaishnavas in a sectarian way. So Prabhupada said, Tadera charana seva bhakta sanivas, janame janame hoye abhilas. And Babaji Maharaj threw in, And then the next thing Babaji Maharaj did is he cracked another joke. And Srila Prabhupada sort of started like heaving, like laughing a little bit. And he said something to Babaji Maharaj, and Babaji Maharaj laughed all the time anyhow, because Prabhupada said he had attained the stage of Bhava Bhakti and he was always happy. And one time Prabhupada was giving class in Mayapur and Babaji Maharaj was sitting next to Prabhupada and he was laughing all the time. And the young Western devotees were getting annoyed. And Prabhupada said, do not disturb. He is experiencing transcendental bhav. He is laughing. Do not disturb him. And so then Babaji Maharaj, he said something to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada again, he said, Tadera charana seva bhakta sanivas, janame janame hoy e abhilas. My only desire is to live in the association of the Vaishnavas, birth after birth, and engage in service to their lotus feet. And Babaji Maharaj, he was beaming. And then Srila Prabhupada folded his hands and he looked at Babaji Maharaj and he said, could you please sing for me? You know, it was like so sweet. Could you sing for me? And Babaji Maharaj, he said, yes, Prabhupada. And so I can recall he sang this beautiful song by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur that was a Nama Mahatmya, meaning it was like one of those songs like Jasomati Nandana Brajabharana Agara. But this song, I think it was Harinam Tua Aneka Sarupa, and it was just so many different names of Krishna and the potencies of Krishna. Just, like Bibabari Sesha, Aloka Pravesha, all the names of Krishna. And he sang with so much love. When Babaji Maharaj would sing, you would just feel tears coming to your eyes automatically, because he was singing with love. He wasn't singing from this, but he was singing from his soul. And he finished, and Prabhupada folded his hands and he was just saying, thank you so much, thank you so much, thank you so much. And Babaji Maharaj looked at him and he said, Prabhupada, I must go now. Do you give permission that I may go? And it was just so sweet. And it was so cultured, and it was so pure, and it was so innocent. These two glorious people, greater than any of the great people of this world, more glorious than the demigods, just pure devotees of Krishna. And it was just so simple, and it was so pure, and it was so loving, and it was so warm. And Prabhupada, he folded his hands, he said, thank you so much. Yes, you may go. So Babaji Maharaj just bent over. And then Babaji Maharaj sort of bounced off the bed and he started to make a beeline to the door. And then Prabhupada spoke to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He must have Mahaprashadam. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj turned to me and he said, "You must give him Mahaprasadam." And so I offered my obeisances to Prabhupada and I started running from Babaji Maharaj. And he'd made it up to about the guest house. And I said, "Babaji Maharaj, please, you sit here." I said, "Srila Prabhupada wants me to get you Mahaprasadam." And so very obediently, he sat down, just like a boy. You know, I said, "Please, you sit here." And he just said, "Yes, Prabhu." You know, one time later, back in the early 80s, one time we were invited for the Vyasa Puja of Srila Prabhupada's godbrother, Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj. And that year, I think he was 100 years old. And he was such a humble Vaishnava. And so we went to that temple on the other side of Vrindavan, and they had all of the celebration downstairs. And then after the celebration was finished, they said, "Now we can go upstairs and have darshan of Puri Maharaj." So we went up to his room, and everybody was trying to glorify him and say some kind words. And he was just 100 years old, and he was just sitting like this. And then one of the brahmacharis from the temple walked in and said, "Now everyone will go downstairs to take prasadam." So we all started to leave, and then we noticed, you know, Puri Maharaj was trying to stand up to go downstairs. And the brahmachari looked at me and said, "No, no, Maharaj, you stay here. We will bring prasad for you." And he looked up and he said, "But you're a Vaishnava, and you gave the order that everyone should go take prasad. When the Vaishnavas give instructions, our duty is just to follow them faithfully." And I was thinking, gosh, how humble a person this is, you know. And the Brahmachari said, "No, no, Maharaj, sit down, sit down." So I had Babaji Maharaj sitting in a chair in the guest house, and I quickly ran to the front of the temple, and I said, "I need Mahaprasadam for Kinchana Krishnadas Baba." And so they gave me 2 besan laddu and a leaf cup with a tulsi leaf. And so that was it, you know, just 2 very simple besan laddu. And I came running back to the guest house, and I came to him and I said, "Maharaj, here is Mahaprasad." And when I gave it to him, he looked at me and said, he was like, "Mahaprasad, Mahaprasad, thank you so much. You're so kind to me. You gave me Krishna's Mahaprasadam. Thank you, thank you." And then he said, "Now may I go?" And I said, "Yes, Maharaj, please." So then he was stepping out of the door of the guest house. We used to have 2 doors in the guest house. Now everybody knows the one door that's there now, but I think there's a reception desk on one side, and there used to be double doors there with a step down. And when he was stepping out, somebody was sitting on the steps. And he looked down to see who it was that was sitting there. It was Srila Prabhupada's sister, Pishima. And I was thinking, oh my God, now we have 2 pure devotees in front of my eyes again. What is going to happen? And he looked down and saw Pishima, and this big smile, you know, came on his face. And Pishima, she looked up and saw him, and this big radiant smile came on her face. And Pishima, she was very short, and she was very, very round. And she was probably just a few years younger than Srila Prabhupada. And she was bent, she had like one of those people bent over at the waist. And she looked up, and Babaji Maharaj was there. So then Pishima started to get up. And Babaji Maharaj was standing like this, you know. And Pishima, in her bent over form, she was coming and she wanted to bend over and she wanted to take the dust from Babaji Maharaj's lotus feet. And, you know, she would like struggle to get to his feet. And just when she was ready to touch his feet, he would scoot back a couple inches. And then he would just started like roaring with laughter. And she would look at him and she would say something to chastise him. And then he'd go, yes, yes. And then he would stand. And then she would approach and try to touch. And he would move back. And he would like start laughing so loudly. And she would like start chastising. And he said, yes, yes. And so then she came. And she took the dust from the feet of this pure devotee. And she was a pure devotee. You know, it was so beautiful. And when Pishima, she took the dust from Babaji Maharaj's feet, she like took the dust, she took off her glasses, and she like put the dust on her eyes. And then she like smelled the dust. And then she like rubbed the dust on her head. And then she was like rubbing the dust on her heart. You know, it was like, it was so unenvious and it was just so pure. And then Babaji Maharaj looked at her and smiled and he said, I have Mahaprasadam. Would you like Mahaprasadam? And when Pishima heard that, she just lit up like the sun. I mean, my goodness. Many times people bring us Mahaprasadam and we just go, oh yes, Mahaprasadam, thanks. But these people were so special. They just knew that that was something that had the taste of Krishna's lips, had the Adar Amrita, the nectar of the lips of Krishna inside. And she was thrilled. And Pishima, she was a fantastic cook. And probably in the span of her lifetime, she must have made 10 tons of besan laddu, you know, and super. But when he offered her a besan laddu, she was like thrilled beyond belief. And she took that besan laddu and then she, you know, she took it and she was saying, thank you, Mahaprasad. And Pishima, in her hand, she always carried a jar, a little glass jar of Ganga water, always. It was inseparable from Pishima. And one time I asked her, I said, Pishima, why do you always carry this bottle of Ganga water? And she sort of like looked at me, she was bent over, she looked at me, she said, I am living in this old, nasty, filthy body. She said, it is so contaminated. She said, wherever I sit, just by my presence, it becomes filthy. So whenever I get up from sitting someplace, I sprinkle it with Ganga water to purify it. I mean, can you imagine having such a nice consciousness like that? She said, I sprinkle it with Ganga water to purify it. So she looked at Babaji Maharaj, she said, I have Ganga Jal. Would you like Ganga Jal? And Babaji Maharaj went, Ganga Jal. And she said, yes. And so she took off the lid, gave him a few drops of Ganga water, and he took it. And they just stood there and they said a few kind words to one another. And then Babaji Maharaj said, may I have your permission to go? And she said, yes. And then he went away. So Krishna was so kind that he showed me these just simple, loving relationships between the Vaishnavas. Giving a little prasadam, taking a little prasadam, saying some kind word, sharing some ideas. It wasn't a difficult thing, but it was something that was so filled with love. And if we do that with one another, if we want to be good Vaishnavas, or if we want to become Vaishnavas, we should practice these principles all the time. Just like yesterday, I was talking to Partha, and he was asking me like questions. How do we view Lord Shiva? How do we view Durga Devi? How do we view Hanumanji? And I was explaining from the Vaishnava perspective, how we view Lord Shiva and Devi and Hanumanji. I told him, every time I do Vrindavan Parikram, I come to Keshigat. And there's a temple of Hanumanji. And every time since 1976, when I first came to Vrindavan, when I see that Hanumanji, I pray to him. And I always pray, Hanumanji, you have so much nishta in the seva of Lord Ram because you're such a Vaishnava. I said, could you please give me that type of nishta for the seva of my spiritual master and the Vaishnavas that I can serve with so much unadulterated love. Or we see Lord Shiva, and the greatest Shastra is the Srimad Bhagavatam, and in the conclusion of the Bhagavatam is that Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu. And whenever I see Lord Shiva in any temple, I stop and I pray, you are the greatest Vaishnava. And I've heard that Vaishnavism is a great thing. And one day, I would like to become a Vaishnava. Could you please bless me? Could you please bless me? Or Devi, she's in charge of this world. And we don't look to Devi to pray for something material, but we look as Vaishnava. Can you please bless me? That I could become the pure servant like you are of Krishna. May I serve purely? So this is what is said, that the Vaishnavas they're the desire fulfilling trees, and they're full of compassion. And therefore, in we as aspiring Vaishnavas, we should always have the best relationships with the devotees. We should always have loving relationships with the devotees. And, if we do that, Krishna will become pleased with us. Just like every day we sing, Jasya Prasada Bhagavad Prasado, Jasya Prasada Nakati Katopi. If we please our spiritual master, then Krishna will be pleased with us and open the path of bhakti. But if we displease the spiritual master, then it will simply wreak havoc on our path of devotional service. And we know if we please the Vaishnavas and if we serve the Vaishnavas, Krishna will show special compassion and mercy to us. And if we offend the Vaishnavas, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, that is hatimata. That is like wild elephant. If we please the Vaishnavas and Krishna becomes charitably disposed to us, what will one of the blessings be? Krishna says, Tesam sasati yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam tadami puriyogam tam yena mam upayanti te. And it means Krishna, if we please devotees and serve devotees and love devotees, Krishna will give us the intelligence of how to attain that goal of going back home, back to Godhead. And I was reading this afternoon, see if I can find it. You know, there he says, Didami Buddha Yogam Tam. And Srila Prabhupada in his commentary, he describes that Buddha Yoga is action and Krishna consciousness, and that's the highest type of intelligence that we can have. But in order to have that, we have to behave in a proper way in the association of Krishna and Krishna's devotees. And he says, because Buddha Yoga is the activity by which the heart will become absolutely free from any type of material contamination. And that's the ultimate good that we receive from serving the Vaishnavas and serving Krishna. And therefore, the association of devotees, Prabhupada says in his commentary, the association of the Vaishnavas and the association and the service of Vaishnavas and the association and the service of the spiritual master are absolutely important. You know, we should be very careful that we don't mess that up in our practices of bhakti. And in that verse, Bhagavad Gita 10:10, and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, you know, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, sometimes he sort of reveals the thought process of Arjuna and why Krishna may say a particular thing. And it's because Arjuna has something going on inside of his head. He has some question going on inside of his head. And, and there he says, Tesam satati yukta nam bhajatam pritipurvakam. So Arjuna's thinking that according to your statement, your devotees attain the supreme bliss by performing bhakti. And it's because of bhakti that they can go beyond the three modes of material nature. And then he says, so how do they get that bhakti? And, you know, from what source they learn about the bhakti? And then Krishna replies, he said, I will personally inspire them. Didami Buddha Yogam Tam Yenamam Upiyantite. And then they can come to me. And if they will serve my devotees, then they will receive inspiration to go back to God. So this Vaishnava Seva is such an important thing that we should never take lightly. And all of us are challenged at every step of our lives. You know, all of us still are carrying the yoke of the material nature on our shoulders. We have bodies that are made out of the three gunas of material nature. You know, our minds are materially contaminated. We need mercy. But to get that mercy, we should just give our hearts to the wish-fulfilling, compassionate desire trees of the Vaishnavas and serve them. And then Krishna will give special dispensation. And then we can engage in pure devotional service. And one may say, well, what is this process of bhakti that the Vaishnavas are teaching? And then we look at the words of our great acharyas. And I was just thinking this afternoon, what is a good example or some words of our great acharyas, you know, instructing us on how to actually come to this point of full surrender and capturing the goal of life. And I thought naturally of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his Sharanagati. And he says that we have to, you know, we have to grasp different qualities. One quality is dainya, or humility. And then the other quality is dedication of our soul, which is Atma Nivedana. And then we have to accept the Lord is our only maintainer. And this is an interesting one because generally, you know, we're all at our jobs, or you're all at your jobs and you're working. And sometimes, you know, sometimes people have the consciousness that I'm the doer, I'm making the money and I'm putting the food on the table. But Krishna is our only maintainer. And when I was thinking of this afternoon, I remember one time back about 1982 or 81, when I was in Israel. And one of my friends came from Europe to visit me, and he wanted to go to the Dead Sea. Everybody wanted to go to the Dead Sea. So we drove down, we were in Haifa, we drove down to Tel Aviv, we drove down to Jerusalem, and then we drove down to the Dead Sea. And then after we had our bath in the Dead Sea, we were driving, and at that time, now they have the West Bank and they have all of those problems over there. But back then, you could just drive anywhere, you know, like no problem. So we were driving in this Palestinian area, and the Dead Sea is like the lowest place on earth. And we were driving in this low area, and then all of a sudden there were like these sharp cliffs that came up, just like, and the area was where the ancient city of Jericho is. Jericho, in the Bible, it's mentioned that one saintly person, his name was Joshua, he fought a great battle, you know, at Jericho. So we're driving along, and there's these bluffs, these cliffs are there, and then we're looking up, and me and my friend, we saw that up on the side of this hill, there was a big door. And we said, that's really strange. And we were thinking, well, let's go there. You know, it's like curiosity killed the cat. So we decided to go there and see what it was. And so we sort of like, you know, parked the car. We sort of like slowly made ourselves way up the side of this hill. There was a slight path, and we came to this big door on the side of the mountain. And we were like, boom, boom, boom. No answer. And then we went, doom, 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 no answer. And then doom, doom. And then finally the door was like slowly opening. And a monk looked out. And this monk must have been 75 years old, something like that. And when he saw us, he had this big, kind smile came on his face. He said, welcome, please come in. And we went in, and it was a monastery right on the side of the mountain. And it was a monastery built in the place where Jesus Christ has sat on the side of the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights and fasted. And after 40 days and 40 nights of fasting, he was tempted by the devil. And it was just a few ancient monks living in there. I mean, ancient people. And he showed me how through the years they had carved like little lines on the side of the mountain. So whenever it would rain, the water would come down and it would fill their tank. And the only thing they ate up there were some, you know, every now and then somebody would bring them some beans and some rice, and they would take dry fish, and that's all they lived on. And then he showed us the beautiful chapel, and he showed us the place where Jesus Christ is sat to perform his austerities. And we were like very amazed. And then I looked at him and I said, and this is about 1980. And I said, Father, how long have you lived here? And he looked at me, he said, I stepped inside of this monastery in 1945, and I've never stepped outside of this monastery. I've lived here the whole time. I said, that's amazing. I said, and you all live here. I said, you must have some very good system of maintenance. And he looked at me and he said, yes, we have the most expert maintenance system. And I said, what is that? He said, our maintenance system is God. He is our only maintainer. The Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Dainya, humility, fully giving your soul, feeling that Krishna is your only maintainer, feeling that Krishna is your only protector. And then he says that one should execute activities that are only favorable for pure devotional service, and one should abandon all activities. And we could, I'm already way over time. I don't even know if people are still online here. But, activities favorable for pure devotional service, serving Vaishnavas, chanting the holy name purely, hearing the Bhagavad, residing in a holy place, worshiping your deities with the faith that your deities are Krishna. They're not just statues, but they are Krishna. Those are activities favorable. And abandoning activities not favorable, never allow your tongue to say something bad about Vaishnavas. Never criticize Vaishnavas. Always follow the principles that you've been given. Always lead a dharmic life. And then Bhaktivinoda says something interesting. He says, there will be an effect of your bhakti if you perform your bhakti following these principles. He says that the youthful son of Maharaj Nanda, Sri Krishna, will hear the prayers of any person who takes refuge in him by following this path of full surrender to the Lord. And many times we wonder, does Krishna hear our prayers? But here, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, without question, the youthful son of Nanda Maharaj hears the sincere prayers of any Vaishnava who follows devotional service according to these principles. And then he concludes, and how does he conclude? He doesn't, he doesn't conclude by saying, wow, I just wrote another great prayer. But he concludes by saying, placing straw in my teeth, I fall to the ground, weeping and weeping. I clutch the lotus feet of Rupa Goswami. I clutch the lotus feet of Raghunatha Goswami. And I tell them, I am the lowest of all men, but I'm begging you, please show me the way to become the best of men by engaging in pure devotional service and the loving association of the Vaishnavas. So each of us will be challenged. Such a challenge we've had in the past year, COVID-19. We have challenges with our health to begin with. We have mental problems. It's a given. There's no one who's not having problems with the mind, no one who's not having problems with the body. We have financial problems. You all are living in a place that, becomes hotter than, Patala Loka, and sometimes of the year it becomes so unbearable. Challenges are always there. But our only source of shelter, our only source of refuge will be to serve Vaishnavas with love. Keep a positive mentality about Vaishnavas. Engage in devotional service and the association of Vaishnavas. Serve Vaishnavas. It's a hard time. Call one of your friends and give them some kind words. Help in any way that you can. And then Krishna, he will show mercy. Dadami buddhiyogam tam. He'll give you that knowledge by which you can come to him. Yenamam upayantite. And then he says, I'll bring you to me. Okay, I'm like way over time. Thank you all very much for having me this evening. I pray that you are all well and healthy and everything is very auspicious for you in Gauranga Dash. And I pray that one of these days you'll all be able to get together again, have a good kirtan, and have some Krishna Katha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you for highlighting the qualities of Vaishnava devotee and how to perform devotional activities, how to improve in our daily routines. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much. I know it is late for you. Thank you, Maharaj. Would you be able to take up 1 or 2 questions, Maharaj, if time permits?
Prabhuji, over here it's 9:15.
Okay.
It is bedtime. Time to go to bed.
Thank you, Maharaj.
We are 70 years old. We are not young like you. You are a young man.
Maharaj, shall I ask the devotees to put on their camera so you can bless all the devotees? You can also see the devotees as well.
As you like. I like looking at this numbers.
Can you please put on your camera?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hey there. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna
Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hello.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Mahaprasadam. Please accept.
Oh, yum. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj, for accepting Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Thank you.
His Holiness Bhakti BB Govinda Swami Maharaj ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj.